Alright, this is part 2 of the sine and cosine ratio video. So if you're confused as to what I'm doing, that means you clearly have not watched part 1, so please go back and do that. That would add some clarity to what I'm doing now. But let's look at this problem. We have a right triangle, and we are asked to solve for x and for y. And we want to round our answers to the nearest hundredth. So let's say that the instructions said to the nearest hundredth. This is a clue that you are going to need to, you're not going to leave your answer as, x equals, sine of something. All right, sine's not going to be an answer. You're going to change it to a decimal, which means you're going to need a calculator to do so. So we're looking at solving for x first. We could solve for y using Pythagorean theorem. If you want to do that on the side, I think that would be cool to see if you get the same thing. But I'm going to show you how to do that with after we find x. So using trig functions, right? These are called trig functions. Sine, cosine, tangent, all trig functions. So if I have the ratio involving x, I can either use sine, cosine, or tangent. So the clue here is that we know these two side lengths, right? We know 3 and 12. So how do those side lengths relate to x? Well, 3 is the opposite leg to x, right? 3 is the opposite leg to x, and 12 is the hypotenuse. So the ratio that I would want to use would be sine of x, because we're dealing with the opposite and the hypotenuse. And again, as you remember, sine is the one that is S-O-H, right? So-ka-toa. So sine has the opposite and hypotenuse. So we have sine of x equals the opposite side length, which is 3, over the hypotenuse, which is 12. Now, if we want to solve for x, this should remind you pretty much exactly of the tangent. In order to get x by itself, or the angle itself, again, we cannot divide by sin, because this is not sine times x. Okay, the appropriate way to do this is to say that x equals sine inverse, or inverse sine, of 3 over 12. I'm going to simplify this to 1 over 4, though, just because I'm picky like that and I like to do that. You'll get the same answer if you do 3 over 12, though. So x equals sine inverse of 1/4. So again, on your calculator, you're going to hit the second button, followed by the sine button, and then in the parentheses, you're going to hit 1/4. And when you do that, again, make sure it's in degree mode. You should end up with x equals, I should not say equal because I'm rounding. X is approximately, again, this is just my drunk equal sign, right? Its judgment's a little off. So it's approximately what? When you type this in your calculator, you get approximately 14.48. It says 14.477512185593, blah, 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 blah. But just round to the nearest hundredth, 14.48. 14.48 what? Degrees, right? Degrees. So, now we want to see if we can find out what y is, okay? And again, I want to do this with one of my trig functions. I have 3 available. So, I can either use sine, cosine, or tangent. Well, since this lesson is on sine and cosine, I'm not going to use tangent. If you want to know how to use tangent, go back and watch the tangent video. But I'm going to use cosine because we already know x, and when we already know x, I'm going to look at how y relates to x. So again, we're dealing with this angle here. If we're looking for y, we already know that the hypotenuse is 12. And we know what x is, right? X is approximately 14.48. So I can solve now for y by setting up a cosine ratio. So cosine of x is what? The adjacent side length, which is y, over 12. The adjacent side length, which is y over 12. Now in this case, I'm just going to input 14.48 as my angle measure. So again, this is not an exact answer, this is rounding. So I'm going to say cosine of 14.48 equals y over 12. Therefore, y equals 12 cosine of 14.48. And when you type this into your calculator, you get approximately y, I'll write it up here because I think the Doseri symbol's up there. Y is approximately, that was a terrible drunk equal sign, wasn't it? Y is approximately, that's better, 11.62. That's rounded to the nearest hundredth. So here's my two answers for x and y. Again, I encourage you to use the Pythagorean theorem and see if you get the same answer for y. Hopefully you do. If not, something went wrong. So anyway, that's that example there. Let's look at another one. It's a word problem this time. So let's say you have a staircase and it has, it has this red symbol. Did I just say symbol? That doesn't make any sense. It has a red line on it that currently is not that important. So let's say we start with this picture. Now the problem is this. You need to get a refrigerator, a big refrigerator, that's very heavy. Okay? It's very heavy. It's too heavy for you to lift. You cannot lift this. It's too big. Okay? It's impossible. So you need to get this refrigerator up these stairs. Okay? The way to do that would be to make some sort of a ramp. Okay? It'd be to make some sort of a ramp. So if I'm going to draw my ramp here, I'm going to draw a ramp. It's going to be bright red, as most ramps are, obviously. I'm going to draw a ramp here. If I know that my ramp is, let's say, 9 feet long, and I can measure the angle here, this angle here, this angle with the ground, I can say this angle is 25 degrees. The question for you would be, how high is the staircase? So how high is the staircase? Now, that means we're solving for this side length here, right? We're looking for this here. So if you notice, it does create a right triangle, right? Assuming, of course, that the staircase is going straight up. So it does create a right triangle, which means we should be able to solve this. So I'm going to input the information they gave me. The ramp is, let me get rid of this animation, if you will. The ramp is 9. The angle is 25 degrees. And I want to solve for h. So we can set up a trig function here and say that h equals, or that, well, let's look at the angle. The angle that we have is 25 degrees, right? H is the opposite side length to the 25, and we're given the hypotenuse. So we're looking for something that involves opposite and hypotenuse. So hopefully you recall that sine involves the opposite and hypotenuse. So we're going to say that sine of 25 is the opposite, h over the hypotenuse, 9. And to solve this, you get h equals 9 times sine of 25, which is approximately 3.80. 3.80 3.80 feet. Okay, so this is kind of a scenario where you may want to use one of these things. If you want to know how high the stairwell is, or if you know how high the stairwell is and you want to figure out how long of a ramp you need. Those are kind of situations where these may come into play. So that's it for this lesson, and hopefully you learned something new, and there will be more videos to come. Alright, so have a wonderful day. Oh, that's a dead face. I don't want to do that. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Toodles.